This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Habayim. We're interrupting our regular scheduled Shaina Halacha Shiur. We're up to Siman Daled, but since we just came back from Morocco and we visited many Gedolim, so we want to give them their due attention. By Shalshudas yesterday we spoke about a number of the tzaddikim we visited. Today that we're going to speak about a tzaddik, Rabbi Vidal Hatzarfasi. We want to thank our eminent guests, Rabbi Tzvi Marmerstein, one of the Chashava Magidei Shir and Rabbanim in Edgeware, and Rabbi Josh Morhaim, one of my best friends, and he's one of the governors of the Machai International Board, and one of my dearest friends, who's dedicating today's breakfast in honor of the historic trip to the United States with Reb Nicholas Smar. And you know, Avram Avinu was very honored to have 3 angels, but they were only malachim. But I have 3 tzaddikim. That's much greater, and I'm much more honored. And I hope they come. I hope this will be the address whenever they come to America. It's really a great cover to have them. We're going to speak today about Rabbi Vidal Hatzarfasi. Rabbi Vidal Hatzarfasi. This is very amazing. The Chida writes in his entry to Rabbi Vidal Hatzarfasi, it's not on your sheets, Echad mi Ga'oinei Hamarav, one of the great Ga'oinim of the West, HaKadmoinim. He's a Kadmoin. Kadmoin means he's a little bit after the Rishonim. V'harav Karban Aroin Hoymi Bestina. The Karban Aroin was on the Bezin Rabbi Vidal Hatzarfasi. The Chida does not mention why he's called Hatzarfasi. What does Tzarfas mean? France. Because he was a direct descendant of Rabbeinu Tam, 12th generation from Rabbeinu Tam. So France means, what's France? France means the house of Rashi, the house of Rabbeinu Tam. So it's 12th generation from Rabbeinu Tam. He wrote Hasagos on Rebbe Yom Mizrachi. He wrote a sefer Tzuf Devash, which we have in front of you. He was the Av Bezin of the city of Fez. By the way, the cemetery in Fez, one of the most beautiful cemeteries. By Shalshudas yesterday we spoke about the cemetery in Marrakesh. The cemetery in Fez is really great place. I don't think great place to die. I don't know, great place to be buried. And the Chida writes that his works are mamish bekitzer nimratz. In other words, he says like this. First of all, he says v'yesh lo yachas ad Rabbeinu Tam ben bitoy shorashi, and that his works are bekitzer nimratz ma'od, and you have to exert yourself to be able to understand the precise words of Rabbi Vidal Hatzarfasi. Now, very interesting. I'll tell you something that he says in Parshas Vayechi, and then something he writes on this week's Parsha, but not here on Sefer Shemos, but rather in a manuscript on Sefer Rus. And then we'll talk about his Divrei Torah on Sefer Shemos. On the Pasuk, Heyasvu va'agid alachem, es asher yikra eschem ba'acharis hayamim. We usually translate that to mean, gather, and I'll tell you, es asher yikra eschem, what will happen to you. What will happen to you? Es asher yikra eschem. But Rav Vidal says it doesn't say Yikra with a Hey at the end. It doesn't say Asher Yikra Eschem Yud Kuf Reish Hey. It says Yikra Yud Kuf Reish Aleph. So Yikra doesn't mean happen. It means call out. Meaning, whatever happens to a Jew, it doesn't happen to them. It's preordained, proclaimed, min hashamayim, designated. It's a very important emphasis. It's sort of a mistranslation to say, Yaakov was saying, here, come here, I'm going to let you know what's going to happen to you. Nothing happens. Yikra, it's pre-called out. Hashem calls out. Before anything happens, there's a bas kol min hashamayim that decrees as goyzer min hashamayim, such and such should happen. Okay. So before we hit the Maram Komis here, I want to ask you a question. This is one of the very important questions on the Parsha. So Miriam and Yocheved do not succumb to the pressure of Paroi. V'atechayenas hayeladim. We'll see Rav Vidal has a very interesting pshat what that means. V'atechayenas hayeladim. But literally they kept the kids alive. So the pasuk says, Vayas Lahem batim. Hashem made houses from Miriam, the house of Leviah. From Yocheved, the house of Leviah. From Miriam, the house of Malchus. Kings came from Miriam. What kings came from Miriam? Malchus based David. How did kings come from Miriam? Miriam is Bas Levi. The answer is Miriam married Kalev ben Yefuneh. Kalev ben Yefuneh is from Mishpachas Yehuda. So all the Malachim came from Yefuneh, Kalev. That's what Rashi says. The problem is, if you look in Sefer Rus and you look at the royal dynasty, Oived, Yishai Hoyled Es, Oived Hoyled Es, Oived Hoyled Es Yishai, Yishai Hoyled Es David, and we have the whole family, and you have somebody by the name Kalev. Is Kalev in that line? Kalev's not mentioned there. Kalev is who? Kalev ben Yefuneh. Who's Yefuneh? So if you look in Divrei Hayamim, Yefuneh is Chetzroin. So it's Kalev ben Chetzroin. And in Rus we say, the Chetzroin Hoyled Es Ram. So Ram was Kalev's brother. So Kalev was not in the line of Malchus Beis David. His brother Ram was in the line, but Kalev was not in the line. So what does Rashi mean that in the merit that Miriam did not exterminate the Jewish children, she was zoicha to have the Malchus Beis David? Malchus Beis David came from a different guy. Wrong man. It's a pliya atzuma. I believe the Marsha and Soita asked this question. There is no great answer to this question. Rabbi Reisman writes in his book that he found in a manuscript of Rabbi Vidal Hatzarfasi that Rabbi Vidal says you have to say Ram and Kalev, one of them died, and the other one was Miyabim, the wife. So either David came from Kalev, or he came from Ram, but because Kalev was Miyabim, Ram's wife, so therefore the child is attributed to him through the Sod HaYibam, but there must have been a Yibam in there. That's a chidush of Rabbi Glatstein in Parsha Shemos, but it's not in his chidushim on Shemos, but rather it's in his manuscript on Megillas Rus. Okay, I want to share with you a few Divrei Torah from Rabbi Vidal on this week's Parsha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol mivarei. Ve'ela Shemos. If I can have a Chumash, that'll be great. Ve'ela Shemos. So we're counting the Bnei Yisrael. How are we counting them? There's no head count over here. It's not Legul Galoisam, it's the names. So Vidal says the reason why they're counted by names is Shalo Yikanes Ayin Harabahem, so that the evil eye does not enter them. In other words, if we're just going to count him, then the excessive attention could cause Ayin Hara. But it seems like if somebody's counted by the name, Ruvain, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, that avoids Ayin Hara. So instead of counting them, it's Mana Shemoisam. Al derach b'mispar Shemos legugalaisam. Okay, interesting. Here's the next ha'ara. This is a Pele Atzuma that nobody has an answer to. Okay, you open up Sefer Shemos, and you see the names of the Shvatim. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, Ubenyamin. How did Binyamin get into the pasuk with Yisachar, Zvulun? Dan v'Naftali, Gad v'Asher? What kind of order is this? Anybody have any explanation for this? Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Okay, so far so good. But it's definitely not in order now, because after Yehuda, Yisachar wasn't born after Yehuda. Leah stopped having children after Yehuda. Vata'amoid miledes after Yehuda. So she took Zilpah. So Yisachar, Zavulon? No. He wasn't born next. Binyamin? Binyamin's the youngest. So this is not Keseder Toldoisam. This is not Keseder of the Degalim. This is not Keseder anything. What in the world is this order? By the way, there's a shita in terms of counting the Jewish months, which month is connected to which shevet. There is a shita that you go by the pasuk in the beginning of Shemos. Ruvain is Nisan, Shemain is Iyar, in order. But what is the order? This order is what's the order here? You ever wonder about that? The order is not considered toldoisam, not in terms of their age, not in terms of chashivos, not in terms of the way they carried the Mishkan. What's this order? Says Rabbi Vidal Hatzarfasi. I'm not aware that anybody else says this. He says, Mana kan seder lekichasam. This is the order of the children by the way Yaakov married the wives. First Leah, so it counts the Bnei Leah. Then Rachel, because Yaakov married Rachel after. Then he married Bilhah. And then he married Zilpah. What about Yosef? No, but Yosef's not it's counting the Ba'im to Mitzrayim by Seder Lekichasam.
Well.
Did you know that? I didn't know that.
What's the nafkamina?
Nafkamina is why the Torah is... You were saying...
That does what for the children?
It doesn't do anything. It's just a way of counting. Apparently it has chashivos. According to the Shita, we count the months that way.
I don't know. Is it what?
It's a way of organizing. It's a way of counting. What does it do? I don't understand this because it's not accurate. Because first Yaakov married Leah, and then he married Zilpah. Unless it just says Lavan gave Zilpah to Yaakov, but he gave it to her as a cleaning lady. Cleaning ladies are very important. Sometimes they're the second most important person in the household. So, so Yaakov may have gotten Zilpah, but it doesn't mean he married her. Because the pasuk says, "Vayomer Lavan," okay, "Vayikach es Leah v'yitem Lavan la es Zilpah shivchas Leah v'itoy shivcha," but it doesn't mean he married her. It could be not until later. Let's see. What does he say? What
was also Mala Shivua Zos, so there wasn't enough time to have married Bilhah in between Rachel and Leah.
So 1 second. First Yaakov married Leah. Then he got Zilpah. Then he married Rachel, yeah? So Vatera Rachel ki lo yolda liYaakov vatikani Rachel ba'achois v'tem lo Yaakov holi banim. I'll argue with the Kiryas Chana, otherwise what do you need me for? What does he says, what's the question? Why is Rachel before Bilhah and Zilpah? That's because he married Rachel before Bilhah and Zilpah. And I'm saying for Medayik in the Lashon of the Tzuf Tvash, of Rabbi Vidal, Mana kan seder likichasam, the marriage, the taking. So he first married Leah, then he married Rachel. Rachel saw, ki lo yodel Yaakov, atan Rav, atan Yaakov, okay, she should be your wife. So maybe it's not because she's Rachel. Rachel was married before Bilhah, and Bilhah was married before Zilpah. That's not what he says, right? Yeah, I don't think the Kiryas Chana is Rabbi Vidal. I'm sure he's a great man. No, you hear what I'm saying? In other words, this is taka in the order of the marriage. Okay, maybe. Fine. Next. Next offering, next page Kuf Tezvav. V'Yosef haya b'Mitzrayim. And Yosef was in Egypt. No kidding. Everybody knows he was in Mitzrayim. What is the pasuk adding? V'Yosef haya b'Mitzrayim. So Rabbi Vidal says like this: the brothers didn't change their name. Right? Ruvain, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, so Yibada by Akasha. So why did Yosef change his name? He's called Safnas Paneach. The answer is because he was in Mitzrayim. He had no choice. That's shot number one. That's Yosef Shina Shemait Safnas Paneach Zehaya Hechrach Shahaya b'Mitzrayim. In other words, these are the names of Bnei Yisrael. Be impressed that they didn't change their names. Even when they came to Egypt, they were Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Yeah, brother by Kasha, what's Pshat in Yosef? Yosef had no choice. He was in Mitzrayim, so he had to change his name. Or, I think the second shot is, even though I don't think the Kiryas Chana learns this way, the second shot is, Oy, Gam Yosef haya. And even Yosef, even though he was in Mitzrayim, he was still Yosef. Okay, look in pasuk Tes. Vayomer elamoy hine. What does the word hine mean? We had 2 shiurim on the word hine. What does hine mean?
Behold.
Behold. Yeah. Let's say, behold, I have eggs this morning. That's how you talk. Behold, David, Levi, Lane, the Haftarah, the Shabbos. Very nicely. Shkoyach. But what does behold mean?
Moral accountability.
Moral accountability. So usually we say the word behold means surprise. Vayhi ba'boiker, and it was in the morning. V'hinei leah. Surprise. Usually hinei is a surprise. So the question: what's the surprise over here? Hine! Remember that, people? They used to have 12 kids? Well, now they're number in the millions. Surprise, look what happened to them overnight. That's the surprise, says Rabbi Vidal. Here I like what the Kiryas Chana says. Yud beis shvatim v'achshav rava otzamenu v'zo hine lashon hafta'a. It's a surprise. Before you know it. Okay. Hava nischak malai. Hava, come, let us deal wisely with him. Now, is Lashon Hava Lashon Yachid or Lashon Rabim? Says Rav Vidal, Hava is Lashon Yachid. It could have said Havu. Meaning Paroi could have been talking to many advisors, but says Rav Vidal, he had 3 advisors. Who were they? Bilam, Yisroi, Eoiv. Only one of them gave the advice. So it said Lashon Yachid, Hava, because only one guy is going along with this bad plan of Paroi. However, says Rav Vidal, the Lashon of Loi implies Paroi thought he was dealing wisely to benefit himself. Loi implies, no, all of his chachma, Loi, was for us. For us. It was to help us. Because the more he afflicted us, the more we increased. And it expedited the redemption. And it got us out early. Not only did it expedite the redemption, had he not afflicted us, it would have taken longer in Mitzrayim. And then we would have never gotten out. Paro would have been smart, he wouldn't have afflicted us so much. So we would have taken more time to be in Mitzrayim, and then we would have fallen to the Nun Shari Tuma, and we never would have gotten out. So everything Paro did was loy, it was for our benefit. Similar to what we always say in Megillah, Heichin loy, loy heichin. Next, Vatachayena, they kept the kids alive. How? How? This is Paragala Pasuk Yud Zayin. Vatirena hamiyaldos es ha'elokim v'lo yasgashim b'aleim ha'chatzayim vatechayenu es ha'yeladim. Rashi says they gave them water, they gave them food. Says Rav Vidal, they kept them alive with their tefillah, that they should not have any mum. They prayed for their welfare. That was the godless of Shifra and Pua. They were literally the mothers of the Jewish people. They kept alive all of these Jewish children through their tefillahs. That's very powerful. that Yocheved and Miriam were mispala for all the Jewish children, that they should be healthy, they should not have any mum. Okay, Parak Aleph Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Vayehi ki yaru hamayaladois es ha'elokim. And it was when the midwives feared God. Huh? We already said that in Yud Zayin. Vatirena hamayaladois es ha'elokim. So it's repetitive, superfluous. Says Rav Vidal, noisaf al hayira hakoydem es. More than the first fear. Shezu me ahava. What's the question, Josh? Two fears are not ahava. What? Just we have an extra pasuk, so let's darshan it to mean ahava. Why is the second fear? What do you say now?
I don't know, but the Rambam learns out differently from Rav Sajagon that Eov should have spoken up when they were deciding to drown the Hebrew males, and he didn't. That's why the tests occurred. But Rambam says that Eov was tested because he was only serving out of Yira and not out of Ava.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's a good, good point, right? We see that it's not enough to serve Hashem out of fear; you have to serve Hashem out of ahava. So where do we see the ahava in what Shifra and Pua did? Just because it says a second time yira means ahava. So the Rambam says there's two kinds of yira. There's yiras ha'onesh and there's yiras ha'roimimos. There's fear of punishment, where a person is afraid to do an avera. They don't want to get punished in this world, they don't want to get punished in the next world. But the highest fear is what's called yiras ha'roimimos, where a person he's not afraid of repercussion, but he's in awe of the greatness of, which is almost identical to Avas Hashem. Rav Itzla Petterberg writes that Yiras HaRoimimos is nearly identical to Avas Hashem. So it could be, I don't know for sure this is what he means, but you could say the first Yira is Yiras HaOinesh, and the second Yira, is Yiras HaRoimimos. Therefore, we call it, this is Me'ahavas Hashem. By the way, Rav Miller would say, Halavai in this generation, you should do anything out of Yiras HaRoimimos. Don't fool yourself that you're doing anything out of Yiras HaRoimimos. Halavai you should do out of Yiras HaOinesh. Halavai you should get up in the morning because, for schar. People say, no, I don't want to serve Hashem for reward. Halavai, that should be your mode. That's the highest madrega that you could possibly aspire to in a full sense. Okay. Here's a good one. Parak Beis, Pasuk Yud Beis. Vayifen koi v'choi, Moshe turns both ways. Vayar ki einish, he saw there was no man. Question: if Moshe is going to kill them with a sword, he has to make sure there's no man there. But as for Vidal, we know Moshe Rabbeinu was killing them with the Shem HaMefayrosh. If you're killing someone with the Shem HaMefayrosh, what does he have to be afraid of? What's he scared of? He's killing with the Shem HaMefayrosh. So therefore, Chazal say, ki ein ish. Einish doesn't mean he had to see that nobody was standing around. Einish means he looked into the future that nobody would convert and come out of these people. Meaning Moshe Rabbeinu had to look to see what will the offspring be like, because it doesn't mean he wanted to make sure nobody was looking, because what does he care if anybody's looking? He wanted to make sure nothing good would come out of these people. So as for Vidal, why? These people had previously violated Gilui Arayos, so they deserved the death penalty. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu have to make sure nothing good would come out of them? So he says something very interesting. They had an opt-out. What would have been if after they were over on Arayos, the person would convert? So Gershon is Gar Kikatan Shnaladami. So they could have gotten out of the death penalty by having a conversion. And once they convert, so then retroactively, or at least from now, they're a new person. Oh, you committed Gilui Arayos. No, I convert now, I'm not the same, I'm a new guy. So Moshe Rabbeinu knew, just in case they would convert and exempt themselves, I have to make sure that nothing good's going to come out.
You should You're not going to convert.
So Kadesh Lo Yizgarina. So what does it mean, Ke'enish? That they would not convert? That they would not convert.
Sounds pretty bad, though.
But Chazal Darshan, he saw Ke'enish Sheyizgayer Mibanav. So he's changing that? That so just, it sounds like just in case they would convert and make themselves pater, so Moshe Rabbeinu, so then he shouldn't kill them, regardless, even if nothing's going to come out. Maybe they'll come out. It sounds like since they could convert and exempt themselves, so then he has to make sure nothing good would come out of them. Yeah, it's not so clear exactly what he's referring to. Okay, then Rabbi Vidal says something which is pretty well known. Moshe Hayaraya. Moshe was a shepherd. So he brings that from shepherding the sheep, he was elevated, he went up, he was Allah to guide and be menaheg the tzoin that is Klal Yisrael. This is the meaning. Nachisa bechazdecha amzuga alta. The Medrash says, B'yad Moshe v'Aaron k'nechias hatzoin, like the shepherding of the sheep. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu shepherding the sheep was sort of grooming him to be able to shepherd Klal Yisrael. By the way, I want to bring your attention back to Parak Beis Pasuk Yud Aleph. This is a Pasha diuk that if you learn Rashi, I was never attuned to this, but Rabbi Vidal points out, if you look in Parak Beis Pasuk Yud Aleph, it says, Vayhi bayomim ha'im, vayigdal Moshe, vayetzei elechav. So Rashi says that vayetzei elechav means he grew up and he grew in his sensitivity, so he went out to shoulder the pain of his brethren. But Rabbi Vidal points out in Parak Beis Pasuk Yud Aleph, he says, Vayigdal vayetzu. Even though Moshe Rabbeinu was Allah L'Gedula, Lo Shakcham Achav. Meaning, Vayigdal, even though he became great and he was elevated, still vayetzu. Usually we learn it to mean, Vayigdal, he grew up. And how was his godless evident? It was evident that he went out to feel and to shoulder and be sensitive to his brethren. But another way of looking at it is, Vayigdal, despite his godless, despite his power and position, still Vayetzei Elechav. Yeah. One more. This is a good one. Let's say a person's davening for something, and he's not answered. What should he do?
Ask again.
Exactly! Give the man an extra bagel. Jordan, if let's say a person davens for something, and he's not answered, he should daven again. Imra Adam, shespal v'loy ne'ene, yachser v'yispal. Shenemar, kavei el Hashem, chazak v'yametz libecha, v'kavei el Hashem. Some Mefarshim learn, I think the Chachmas Manoach, if you see that your silent Shemona Esrei is not being answered, it's because you're not paying attention to the Chazaras Hashatz. It means you're probably learning during Chazaras Hashatz, which you're not allowed to do. People use Chazaras Hashatz to learn, to daven, to say Tehillim. None of those things are permitted. If you learn during Chazaras Hashatz, it's a mitzvah haba ba'aveira. If you maver sedra, Reb Chaim says you might have to do it again. So if you see your tefillos are not being niskabel, yachsav yispalel means pay attention during Chazaras Hashatz. But Pashup Shada means daven again. You're not always answered the first time. Sometimes you have to keep on davening. Sometimes you keep on davening. The Stipler brings down, sometimes the tefillah is answered immediately, sometimes after a year, sometimes after many, many years. But often it's the conglomerate of tefillah which is answered. So if you look in Parag Gimel, Pasuk Zayin, the Pasuk says, Vayomer Hashem, Ra'oi Ra'yisias Ani Ami Asher B'Mitzrayim, Ve'es Tzakosam Shamati. Then Pasuk Tes, Ve'ata Hine Tzakas B'nei Yisrael Bo'elai. What do you mean? Hashem already said in Pasuk Zayin that he heard the tza'aka of Klal Yisrael. What's the repetition? Hine Tzakas B'nei Yisrael Bo'elai. We already heard that. We know that already. So Rabbi Vidal says in one of his pshatim, Oy yermois al hishanois hatfila pa'amim shalosh ki bazeh tishma hatfila. The Stipler writes that repeating the same tefillah is begeder having extra kavana. I mean, it's similar. The same way one would say that having extra kavana by davening is more potent. Repeating the tefillah, the Stipler says, is analogous to that. In other words, the same tefillah again and again and again and again is equally potent. So that, says Rabbi Vidal, is marumaz in the fact that Pasuk Zayin says V'sakasim shamati, and then Pasuk Tes repeats again, Hine tza'akas b'nei Yisrael ba'elai. Maybe you could say, the second time it says Hine. Hine is a surprise. I mean, it's a surprise. You would think, okay, if the first tefillah wasn't niskaba, what? If I say it again, it will be niskaba. Hine! Yeah! Surprise! All you did is you davened again. And this time, it broke the ice. Ve'ata, and now, Hine tzakas b'nei Yisrael ba'elai. Anyway, Rav Chanani ben Kasha Omer, Ratzak HaYisbaruch Hu Zakas Yisrael Lefika Achir B'lam Torah Mitzvah Shenemar Adonai Chafetz V'Antzukah Yagdil Torah V'Yadir.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.